Buckle up, excellence junkies, because this podcast is definitely for you. Welcome to Rockafuel. Do you wish that you could surround yourself with people that love to kick ass just like you? Well, come to my party, baby, and meet some of the brightest stars in the entrepreneurial galaxy, because it is my mission to give these entrepreneurs a platform to declare what they are on this planet to accomplish and to show you why they are rocket fuel. Yes, people. How are you today on a Thursday that feels like a Friday to me? I'll tell you that it's been a crazy week, but I am so excited to welcome you to a really, really important discussion today. When you are, and this is very personal to me, have you experienced being just sick all the time, or just not having enough energy, feeling drained, and feeling like you're doing all the things that you're supposed to be doing, and there's just something that's invisible that's holding you back, that's keeping you from being just at your full potential, right? And today we're super lucky to have one of our board of mentors members of the Rocket Fuel mentorship group, Melanie Weller. She is an expert in helping you understand why this could possibly be happening. She is a neurotheologist, which I'm going to allow her to explain because I feel like she does it way better than I do. But I'm going to tell you from my personal perspective that I am so impressed by Melanie's wisdom, because she has a healthcare professional background, but she's able to connect all of this wisdom, ancient wisdom, to what is actually going on with our body, for us to understand the concept of neuroregulation, and how working on this can just transform all of the ailments that you have been experiencing. So welcome, Melanie Weller. Tell us a little bit more about the fantastical, magical neurotheology.
Oh, thank you, Wanda. I'm so excited to be here. Well, neurotheology is fundamentally how your belief systems live in your nervous system, and how spiritual experiences express themselves in the brain and in your nervous system. Like, what's really happening when you feel like you're having a spiritual experience.
Ooh.
And our
Because there's
brains
something physically happening.
there's physically, right, there are physical expressions of all of that. And every spiritual practice across all religions is a nervous system regulation strategy. Whether you're praying or chanting or whirling, like the whirling dervishes, or you are always trying to regulate your nervous system, whether you're listening to music or listening to somebody chant, whether you're saying a prayer out loud or speaking in tongues, as it happens in some practices, that those are all expressed in the brain in different ways, and how much you practice those then builds those brain pathways that are involved in that. And our brains fundamentally take all of these inputs, whether we're tasting communion or smelling the incense and hearing the bells. If you grew up in a, Catholic or in an Episcopalian tradition, for example, that does a lot of smells and bells.
Yeah.
Those are all nervous system regulation strategies. And when you take those smells, those sounds and all of that input, your brain interprets all of that and creates an output. And that interpretation is fundamentally a story. We are really wired for story. We're not wired for facts. And that's why these ancient traditions across so many cultures have endured for thousands and thousands of years, because they are scientific. It's scientific information told in the form of story.
Interesting. So what's fascinating about that is, in one case, you can go to a medical doctor and talk about how you may have felt that you're doing some meditation more, or you're doing some other practices that you feel are actually affecting your diagnoses, right? And their response very often is, well, if you feel that way, then okay, it doesn't hurt to keep doing it, right? And and it's interesting because for me, having a healthcare background, I feel that's it's so frustrating, and it's so just ignorant of the fact that there is something going on, and to just kind of be like, "Oh, well, if that's how you feel, that's nice," you know? And so what you're saying is, it validates that no matter what those experiences are that you're having, if you feel that response, it's because it's actually doing something for you. It's doing
Absolutely, right.
right.
You're having this response, you're having a physical response, and your beliefs really do affect your outcomes in medicine. The more you believe in an intervention, the more likely it is to be successful for you. And medicine needs to be leveraging the placebo effect big time. There's lots of case studies, for example, on uh, like I know of one where a woman got a series of radiation treatments for cancer, and then they found out afterwards that the radiation machine had not been working all along, but her cancer was gone.
Wow.
And I know of another study where they injected healthy college students with normal saline, and told them that it was chemotherapy, and something like 20% of them had hair loss because they believed it was chemotherapy. And it was a small study, but that just shows you how
Yeah.
powerful our brains are. And whatever you believe, your brain is going to make into some kind of biological response.
Mhm.
And the my favorite some of my favorite research around the uh, or just around the brain is really how we process expectations. Because when we expect something to happen, it doesn't influence the parts of our brain that light up as much as it influences the timing of the way the signal goes through.
Ooh, oh,
And
let's
so
talk
then
about
it's
that more. Okay.
oh, it's a lot of, well, I'll tell you, it's research that I have to read very slowly because it's a lot of math.
Right.
But we're like,
So we're talking
and
about the impact of having expectations
right,
and
but if you think about, like, if it's coming through fast or slow, like, imagine how you might hear somebody talking underwater versus talking normally versus talking really fast, and you're gonna interpret those situations very differently. And if there was ever a really great example of how we're wired for story over facts, I think the pandemic is a perfect case study for that, and the range of uh, beliefs and perceived facts on,
yeah,
around the board on all of that, you're
were
going
much
to
more
interpret.
powerful. The stories were much more
The
powerful than the
stories were
data.
so powerful.
Yeah.
We are not wired for facts. I like to think that, I wonder if in 1,000 years, anyone's going to remember all of this data that we've collected because we're so data focused across so many disciplines now, which I don't think is a bad thing at all.
Right.
But data, whether it happens in research, in medical research, or, uh, in any other domain, gets crafted into a story.
Yes.
And how well you tell that story influences how it lands with
Absolutely.
people.
Yeah. Yeah. And being a scientist, I see that a lot. I think of when I was a pharmacist and I was responsible for helping patients understand why it was important for them to take their medication or take it correctly or tell us about the side effects or whatever. And I never saw it this way, Melanie, but as you're describing it, I felt I was most successful because I spoke about it all in story. I wasn't there to say, well, the data shows, blah. I would say, like, well, let's say you're doing this and you're feeling this way. Well, you don't want to get dizzy and potentially fall. So this is where, it had to kind of have a little bit more, it had a greater connection and therefore a greater impact by doing that. So it's very interesting. So when we're thinking about, here in Rocket Fuel Podcast, we're typically serving, our listeners are entrepreneurs. They desire to be entrepreneurs, but then we have just a lot of beautiful, curious people, which I love too, because that's who I am, right? If we were to take it to kind of the business scenario, that wiring for story goes through everything. One, in what your story is when you're trying to share your gift with somebody, right? The story that you have in your head is going to affect the neurology in your body.
Oh, it affects everything. Yeah. No, I mean, I love playing with just using imagery and speech in the way that you organize a speech and having people test their bodies before and after, and that they didn't have to do anything. You just listened to a story that was structured in what I call neurotransmitter tic-tac-toe, and then your body changed because the story was structured well. And what happens in a well-structured story, or in an effectively transmitted story, is that it has good contrast. We, for as much as we deny that we want trauma and drama and all this, and good and bad and all this kind of stuff in our lives, this range of experiences, contrast is what makes a good story. You wouldn't go to a movie or read a book and rave about it to your friends if there was not enough contrast in it, because it would be boring.
Right.
And contrast is the language of your nervous system. Neurons fire, they don't. There's not really any in between. And so,
interesting.
And the same neurotransmitter cycle we need for change is the same one a good story takes us through. And so there's just we are just so incredibly wired for story at so many levels. And this is why, and certainly storytelling is it's big in the public speaking circuits, it's big in the corporate circuits, but not everybody really structures their story in a way that can create the biggest impact. And as having been a physical therapist and collected all the credentials for decades to have extra letters after my name, I feel like now what's really interesting,
letters,
all the silly letters. The thing that really is interesting to me now is not how do I heal one person, but can I change a group of people? Or how could I write a movie that healed back pain or prevented cancer? And how do we scale this influence of nervous system regulation to be able to have bigger and more meaningful impact?
Yeah. So to kind of reiterate this to the audience that's listening, the concept of story obviously is discussed a lot in marketing and advertising and such, but what we're talking about here with Melanie is its connection to wellness, right? Because just as story is used to influence for dollars, right? And we look at it as intriguing there, I think what's really important is for us to recognize how story is actually affecting our wellness. Right?
Absolutely, because you are running a belief system around your health based on your parents' health, or the people around you. People, when you're surrounded by healthier people, you tend to be healthier. If you're surrounded by sicker people, you tend to be sicker. And and I think we also kind of just end up in stories that we don't really realize. And I'll give you, my personal story. I was named after Melanie in Gone with the Wind. And my mother is so literally Scarlett O'Hara in so many ways. And even my mom has some family land that she's attached to, much in the same way that Scarlett loved Tara in the movie. And it's really kind of terrifying how much this movie has played out in my life, to the extent that my son's girlfriend's name is Scarlett.
Wow.
And to really see how these I think we can certainly choose some stories, but I think some story, like I don't feel I did not consciously in this life choose to play out this story,
Yeah.
but I was named after a character, and I know two other women that were named after Jennifer Jones in for different movies, and those respective movies have played out in their lives.
Interesting.
And
And
the
it's
thing that I
because
really
the influence, right? So there's an influence of the story. Well, even when I think about naming my daughter Milagros because she was a miracle to us through fertility, right? So now, like, that's how we interact with her. Those are the stories we weave into her successes and her struggles and all of these things, and it it just becomes a part of who she is because of the story we created for her
absolutely,
name.
absolutely. And, for me, Melanie quite literally means clad in black. And my dad was a CIA agent. And I learned I think very subconsciously how to fly under the radar, and to
Ah!
live in the movies, Melanie lived in Scarlet Shadow, and so it
Mm.
really like it worked in our house in that way, or I stepped into the role. And
Wow.
I watched I have worked for a long time. One universal story that I'm going to talk about uh, at your metaverse event is the myth of Isis and Osiris.
Mhm.
And I have really identified with this myth in many ways. And when I rewatched Gone with the Wind as a few years ago, and I really hadn't since like since I was really probably quite young, or maybe in my 20s at the earliest, when it just used to be on TV and there weren't nearly as many channels as there are now. And I was so struck by how similar it was to Gone with the Wind, or how similar Gone with the Wind was
It
to the
was
story of Isis and Osiris. And the
Oh.
story of Isis and Osiris is the story of how the stars move. It's the story of the Earth's precessional cycle. It is a scientific story, but they knew if they transmitted it in data, nobody would remember it. So they told
Mm.
it in story. And we all have this, like, our lives and our bodies are all cosmologies too, just like the earth has its, is part of the cosmos. And the leading edge research shows that the universe functions like a big brain, that the math involved is the same as parts of the brain that is the cerebellum, that helps keep our balance and coordination. And that when solar and space weather disrupts the electromagnetic field of the earth, it's measurable in our nervous systems, and
Mm.
it's more disruptive the lonelier we are.
Mm.
And so we are not just uh we're not just responding to our own bodies and our immediate environment, we're responding at the cosmic level too. And that, and we've been storing the cosmos for all of time,
Yeah.
beyond all of recorded time. And those stories can be really, really magical in uncovering really what is the stress that's driving whatever is happening with you in the moment for your
Mm.
health. Because
Mhm.
we know medically that stress is 75 to 90% of all disease and dysfunction, but we don't talk very specifically about really what is that stress
Mhm.
that is underlying this condition. Like, are you being the hero in
It's
someone else's story at the expense of your own? Are you satisfying everybody else's desires at the expense of your own? Are you suppressing your own creativity? Are you not listening to your intuition? Are you, um, not tapping into like not remembering who you really are?
Mhm. Right,
And
and
so,
all these all these things that are driving the underlying stress, and unfortunately, you go to a a traditional healthcare professional, and they're there to say, "Okay, well, here is the medication to address the symptoms," and, and I'm the oddball, the doctor in pharmacy saying, "I don't wanna go to the meds first. How about can you help me get to the underlying reason why these things are happening? Like, what is my body responding to, and how can I address that?" And it's I look forward to the day where it's all mushed together. I know I know you do too, because that's why you educate healthcare professionals.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and we all need a space to be seen and heard to tell our stories. And when we go to the doctor, and it's not the doctor's fault at all, but we only have a few minutes
Yeah.
to tell our story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and the way that we're interpreting the story is not always really true. I actually just worked out yesterday with a friend who had an MRI of his shoulder that was like a full thickness rotator cuff tear. I don't know. There was like a laundry list of terrible stuff and they wanted to do surgery immediately. And he went and got a second opinion and they did another MRI and the MRI results were completely different. And in the epidemiological research, imaging and pain are very poorly correlated. And I just loved this example. It was just such a beautiful example of how even your imaging, the things that you think are most objective about what's happening in your body, is a story. And a few months ago, broke my foot. I had a fall. I was in France, broke my foot, sent the x-rays to my osteopath here. And she was like, oh, you need to see the orthopedist right when you get back. And then I scheduled it. And then I saw the resident first and he was like, oh, avulsion fracture. I was like, avulsion fracture? Nobody said that. That's worse than what
Right.
the last story I got about what this looked like. And then when I saw the head orthopedist, he said, I think it's the angle of the x-ray and I'm not sure your foot was ever broken.
Oh my goodness.
And so like you talk about like going through a range of stories. I mean, I may have sprained, or bone bruised something really big, but it is all, so then I was like, oh my gosh, did I just act in my own story? Like I broke my foot when I didn't have to.
Right. And what's interesting is then you look at, well, how did that affect everything else?
Everything. Right? I went to India on crutches.
Right. I saw the pictures. You didn't stop. But so this is just so important whenever we have big things that we want to accomplish, whether you're an entrepreneur or not, whenever you have that desire that there's more, forward movement that you want to make in your life, right? And you feel that these things are just holding you back, whether it's like, oh my gosh, my back is hurting me again, or I'm constantly sick, and which was what my 2023 was like. And it was very interesting that I had this like dual analysis going on of okay, I know that there's something physically going on, and I want to assess where those physical issues are coming from, but I also know that there is a crap load of story that has just built up to this very stressful year of 2023. And I know that because it was very interesting that at the end of 2023, I got COVID and another sinus infection and reactive airway disease. It's like all the things like, and how I managed it was telling myself this story. Okay, Wanda, you're going through the big breakthrough, the big breakdown before the big breakthrough. And it made me feel less of a victim. I almost felt like, all right, let's shed all the things. Like I'm ready for the new
so
thing.
Good, Wanda. Yeah.
And it affected how I came out of it. Like I'm not 100% now, but I'm like, yeah, all right. I went through the journey I needed to go through, and I know that it's going to be great on the other side. And it's helped me a lot in doing that. And I know that you're going to talk about that at our Rocket Fuel Metaverse, the grand opening. Your particular talk is about really understanding expert strategies. You're going to be giving folks, these entrepreneurs, specific strategies on how to conquer the stress of success. And it starts with understanding, first of all, that there is this connection of story and body, right?
Absolutely. And that your success, the success that you want, and like what you just explained is such a perfect example that this big event that's going to be very successful, that your body went, oh, no, that's a threat. I am going to shut this down right now because I'm not going to allow myself to be this successful.
Woo, talk about that a little bit more, because you were talking about it earlier, that feeling of your goal could literally be considered a threat to your
Absolutely,
body,
because
your nervous
threat is
system.
not processed at the logical parts of your brain.
Mm.
So your goal, whether like, like your business goals for yourself can absolutely drain your immune system, not because you are at the level of your nervous system, at the level of your brainstem and your limbic system,
Mm.
feeling like those are a threat. And so then your body creates a protective output, a protective response. So you get sick, or you get a migraine, or you get back pain, or you procrastinate, or
Interesting.
you drink too much, or go eat a full bag of chips, or whatever the thing,
Mhm.
the output can look really different from person to person. But it's always a protective response, because the success feels threatening, and you can retrain that in your brain
Mm.
and in
You
your nervous
can.
system, so that you can make that safe. You can create a new belief, like literally we rewire how those beliefs live in your nervous system. And most of our beliefs are not super conscious, like
Right.
I'm sure you weren't walking around thinking that this event was a threat
Right.
to you.
Right, right.
It's not going to pull a knife out on you,
Right.
or bite you, or eat you alive, or anything like that. But it's not about being logical. That's not how it is. Even in people that eat really healthy, and I will say, like, I can share this as a personal story too, that I think one of the things I've unpacked for myself is that food was just threatening to me, because it could have pesticides or arsenic or whatever in it,
Mm.
that I had to be so hyper vigilant about my food to stay safe, and it was just impossible to stay safe. And so I kept getting more food sensitivities and more food sensitivities, until I just
Mm.
kind of lost my marbles around it, and really reset my beliefs, rewired my belief systems around that, so that and now I have a new response. I don't have those old responses to food anymore.
Wow. And it starts, guys, as you're listening here to my dear Rocketeers, I want to help highlight the things that I want you to definitely, walk away with. And it means first acknowledging that when these things are happening, when these uh stressors are occurring, and these illnesses, and not being able to sleep, and all of this stuff, um opening yourself up to wanting to understand the core reason for that, like what is going on, versus just feeling like you're a victim of what your body is doing to you. It's like, oh, my body is just always sick, my body's just trying to hold me back from life, or you know what I mean, or and it's even interesting to restructure the story around, let's say, a migraine, right? To say, like, oh, there goes my body just trying to ruin my dreams and momentum again, right? And maybe even lovingly accepting, okay, I get it, body. I know this is really exciting and very threatening what we're doing. I'm going to give you some love and give you some time, and then we're going to move on. And it's, I mean, am I understanding this?
You're totally understanding it. And and I think that it's really about, it's very easy to take pleasure in our successes. It's much harder to take pleasure in our failures
Mm.
and in our challenges. And like in my talk, I'm going to talk about my lawsuit latte. I had life handed me this drink I did not order. And I didn't consciously order, but somewhere I ordered it for sure.
Oh, this will be
But I did
interesting.
not consciously order this lawsuit latte.
Uh,
And but life will hand us drinks that we didn't order.
yeah.
And but you can always have your fearless presence. You can always have your nervous system regulation.
Mm.
You can reframe that lawsuit latte to, instead of being, the victim of it, or, oh, somebody else messed up, or I messed up, or from storing it as a failure, to go, oh, how can I sip on this deliciously and grow from it? And
Yes.
how is this going to be the best thing that ever happened to me?
Yeah. 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 Definitely. Well, you guys can imagine what it's like to have somebody like Melanie in your life more frequently, right? And it's not only to talk about these things on a conceptual level, right? But then actually integrating it into your practice. And this is what's really important. Um, I often get very frustrated when I speak to family or friends that say, "Oh, I know about that. I know about that," but then they don't actually implement anything, right? So what I want to lovingly say to you as you're listening is that's great if you've known or become aware, or maybe you've just become aware here, or we reminded you of this phenomenon and such, but it takes effort to move out of our default settings, right? And to train ourselves to understand the story that is driving what's going on in our body, and then doing something about it. It's not just being like, "Oh, okay, well that's what's happening, so now I know. So what the hell's the
Yeah.
point?" Right?
No, well, you're
No.
right. You absolutely have the ability to rewrite your
Yeah,
story, to
that's
turn the page. And we are wired for what's familiar, not what's right for us.
Ooh, say that again.
We are wired for what's familiar, not what's right for us. And when we
Mhm.
are staying in what's familiar, and that's a safety strategy or a protective strategy for your brain, that, oh, I'm going to find the pleasure in all the terribleness here, because the good stuff, the real pleasure, is threatening.
Yeah.
And so then we don't turn the page of our own stories. We don't go
Mhm.
to the next scene. We stay in a particular scene, and you absolutely have the ability to rewrite your story, to turn the page, to keep turning the page.
Interesting. Now for folks that are listening that are business owners, or let's say they're just thinking about that next dream, and they're or that next goal, and they're in this process of trying to go on this journey to rewrite their story, right? Yet there are other people around them that have not bought into this rewritten story, right? So it's like, how do you handle that? My thought is, I know for me, whenever I tap into any sort of spiritual mindset, coaching or support, I have to tell my husband what's going on, because I can't have him continue to ride along on that old story while I'm trying to reset my story, and then he's interacting with me. Now the thing is, he's not into it as much as I am. But do you have any thoughts or suggestions on
Sure.
that
Yeah.
struggle?
Well, yeah, no, I get where sometimes it's hard, but when you really do the nervous system regulation piece of it, and when you really work with your relationship with your story, then people around you start behaving differently.
Mm.
You like, it really shifts your whole reality. And even when they don't behave as you might like them to, then it doesn't bother you so much. It doesn't become a rub. Like, the holidays
Mm.
are a great example, because if you go home to visit your parents, you suddenly are 12, no matter how old you are.
Right.
It's everybody, you walk in, and that's sort of this collective neurotag that everybody enrolls in,
Interesting.
that, like, you step into the story of your childhood,
Yep.
but you co-regulate your nervous systems in a particular way, that everybody's nervous systems learned how to fire together in a particular way, and that whole neurotag is reactivated when you go home for the holidays.
Yes.
And you're not that person, you're not 12 anymore, so then you're like, "Why?" So then it becomes an irritant.
Right.
That's equal to
Well,
say.
well, that's really interesting. Just in the observation and the understanding that there is, like, everybody syncs up uh, from a neuroregulation perspective, and it does exist. Like, you could feel the vibe changing. I actually was just telling my husband about this example. My parents came for New Year's, and my mother-in-law and such, and we had steak and lobster and all this stuff. So we're rushing to put everything, together on the table. And my dad just sat down and he started eating. And I was like, Dad, you stop eating. And, I gave him like a little on the hand, and it was totally like in fun and jest. And I would do it to like Michael or the kids or whatever. But that is not the story between my father and I. And as I lovingly, and I was like just jokingly just doing it, all of a sudden it was like this energetic, like, whoa, that was disruptive. And so where does that come from? Like I physically felt it, but my father and I are both very we're empaths, and so we're very sensitive to energy. And I felt it. And so as you're saying that, it's like, sure, because when we get together, there's a collective story still.
Absolutely. And you did something, you stepped out of your traditional role in your story and did something that was not predicted, which is what our brains primarily do prediction to that's determining, is this going to be safe or unsafe? So you did something, and then you went like, whoa, was that, I don't even know if that was safe. Like, was what's the fallout of this going to be?
Yes. And it was some sort of collective energy, a collective response that I couldn't describe at that moment. But the beauty of having conversations with experts like yourself is to develop that awareness. Like, first start with the curiosity that there's something there. Wow, there was something there, right? And why did that occur? And now you're putting that, you're putting some clarity around. Sure, I could say, oh, well, that wasn't his expectation and stuff like that. But there was something neurologic. There was physical,
for sure.
I got goosebumps after I did it because I was like, ooh, that wasn't energetically, it was disruptive,
Right. Well, right. It was a contrast. It was in contrast to the way that things. Yeah, right. And your body absolutely responded to the contrast. And the thing about that I think is always so interesting about families,
and
especially when you're when you're biologically related, especially, but certainly like we learn to move from our parents. Like I see like fathers and sons that walk like each other, and mothers and daughters, and that we mimic each other inherently and fundamentally. That's part of what our brains do too. And and we've all got some kind of trauma or stress or drama, like with, like we know because we've all been seen each other at their best and worst moments when in a family. And when, and if you grew up with a parent that was was really high stress or had a lot of trauma that they did not, and a lot of nervous system dysregulation that they did not, resolve or work to resolve, you're co-regulating to that dysregulation, but then you're breathing, like it's kind of like they're getting to live rent free in your body. And so like that your mother's breathing pattern might be living in your body and not in a way that's not serving you, because you saw her breathe day in and day out for all of your childhood. And you didn't consciously watch her breathe, but your brain took in that information. And so you have a breathing pattern there that so if you're, and I'll just say this as a personal example, like my dysregulated mother lived, like I could feel the way that my body had mimicked that, and I had to repattern it at that level. I couldn't, if I just checked in on how I would breathe, like it would be fine. But then it was like, oh, how is the influence of my mother breathing in my body? And that was a completely different thing. So then, because our relationship has historically been contentious, and so then to be able to soothe that out, to not give, to not allow her influence or the memories of her to make my body move in a different way, now makes me not so reactive to things. And she's not as reactive either. And she's not done anything, because she will never do any, the nervous system work that she really needs. But it doesn't matter, because we still co-regulate differently, and I have ways to when I work with people that have complex family member situations, there are ways to suit that out without requiring the other person to engage in it if that's something that's not realistic to happen, because all
So
we
you
can
don't
ever really do is we wire our own responses. We can't.
exactly. That's what I was saying. Like, you don't need to depend on the other person buying into the news story and supporting you like that. That's basically, for me to say, oh, my husband's not bought into the story, or my dad's not bought into the story, that I was telling to myself, yet, as like the adult of the house, and I was being more jovial and joking, where that wasn't something that we did a lot in our home. Um, and so all of that was this balance of saying, like, oh, I felt bad. I made him uncomfortable, but I shouldn't expect him to change his story. I should be okay with the fact that this is my
Right.
story and I'm going to keep
Right.
moving
But
in
it's
that
only
direction.
becomes, I think by my experience has been that as you change your story, you also have to change how the influence of other people are living in your nervous system. And when you do
Yes.
that, when you combine those two things together, then they respond differently.
Right, right. So taking it like into a sales situation, whatever story I might have around having a sales conversation could definitely impact whether I have to take a nap after a sales call, or I have to, sometimes you do something like this and it's so emotionally draining for you. Why is it emotionally draining for some, and why is it like energizing for others? It's the story that they have
It's the
around
story,
it.
and it's the story, and it's the way your nervous system is regulating, and you can completely change. It doesn't have to dysregulate you like that. If you don't,
Mm,
'cause your nervous system regulation is part of your boundaries. Like, if you don't have good boundaries, for
right.
example, then other people might feel like other people are really draining you. Like, I know I love speaking from stage. I do not like being part of an audience nearly as much.
Mm,
Like, being part of an audience is really draining for me, and it can take me a little while to recover from that
hmm.
sort of a situation. But I like, I can do the things that I know how to, do my nervous system exercises before and after, and I have reframed my mindset around it, and I can come out of that in a completely different way than I used to years
Yeah.
ago. And same thing, and even speaking from stage, my nervous system used to collapse before speaking engagements. It would be like, no, 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 this isn't safe.
Uh-huh.
And it took me a while to unpack it, and it would collapse after I visited family too. That it
Mm,
would, because that stress of all of that would really drain my, would just totally tank my immune system.
mhm. Mhm.
But those are all things that you can train. Like, you don't
That's
have to live in that state and have that be so chronic anymore. And I won't say that I don't ever get bit anymore, that things don't, stressors don't happen, but it shows up differently, and in a way, and I'm always like, "Oh, okay, well, now and it always is revealing about the next layer of things that I can
mhm.
address to then really live up to my fullest potential, and I
Right.
don't, and sometimes I just embrace it. I'm like, "Oh, well, obviously I'm getting a lot of pleasure out of this illness right now, so I'm just gonna sip on that delicious, you
Hot
know,
toddy.
blue latte, COVID cocktail, and
Like
I will,
COVID. Oh my yeah, this is such a wonderful conversation. I think getting to the level of the curiosity and the understanding of what's going on, then those are the stepping stones towards actually then starting to learn the tools, right? It's kind of, oh, okay, I know it happens, but then are you going to do something about it? And I love that at specifically at the Rocket Fuel Metaverse launch, you will be sharing those expert strategies. So it's not just going to be about conceptually talking about this, but actually giving you some of those tools. When Melanie said, I learned how to change certain things and do certain things so that I could actually not have those anxiety attacks, before, or shut down before I had to present and such. And so, um, I invite my listeners to come into the Rocket Fuel Metaverse so that you can learn from amazingly experienced and magical people like Melanie. But if you're listening now, Melanie wanted to give you a gift. She actually created a guide on how to regulate your nervous system to the solar system. It actually has specific exercises and things to do. Tell us a little bit more about what this is, and then we'll talk about how they can get it.
So this is a workbook about zodiac and the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve has been my specific part of the nervous system that I have specialized in for many, many years. And where nobody gets stressed or traumatized and walks down the street like a runway model. We all lock up. We lose rotation. Rotation's the first thing we give up. We live in this rotational universe. Everything rotates. And those horizontal thresholds in the bodies, like the rotational, like when we rotate, it's called in the transverse plane, but those horizontal thresholds in our body hold stress more intensely than other planes of the body. So like the base of the skull, our vocal cords, our diaphragms, our pelvic floors, the structures that are horizontal will embody more stress. And so these are all techniques that explain that relative to the zodiac, because we are literally made in the image of the zodiac, in the order of the zodiac, head to toe. And so I show pictures of that anatomy, as well as giving you exercises, like kind of what it might look like to hold the kind of stress, and then what exercises you can do to help resolve that.
Oh, so when you're talking about, because I have seen this workbook, so when you're talking about Scorpio, it's not that those exercises are just for Scorpio.
No, they're pelvic floor, right? But they're for the pelvic region.
Okay.
For sure.
Oh, I picked
and
a good one.
the like a
After
and
2
our
kids, I could definitely learn more about those exercises.
And it yeah, and it connects. And like, for example, one of the things that that I like, well, now I'm going to say that I'll say, I'm pretty sure I connected in the workbook, but now that I'm saying this out loud, I'll have to go back and confirm. But like in you can do Scorpio kind of extra, like do pelvic floor exercises and really, build that map of your pelvic floor in your brain, which can be really important for those kind of problems. But people that have pelvic floor dysfunction also don't use their voice through a very big range. They tend to be more monotone. And so one of the things that is very powerful for people with pelvic floor dysfunction, for example, bladder incontinence is an easy example of this. If you can't move your voice through a big range, your vocal cords are literally like a lid on the rest of your body, and it's creating extra downward pressure that's causing you to pee on yourself. And there is research around this. And so if you, for example, like you're at a great stage of life for this, read a children's book and do all the voices. So you're doing Little Red Riding Hood and the Big Bad Wolf, and that you work that vocal range, you can make huge changes in your in the Scorpio part of your body, your reproductive system.
Wow.
And in esoteric systems, your second and fifth chakra are very intimately connected, and the anatomy quite literally mirrors each other in name and structure in many ways. And so it's very cool to see how it matches in both the scientific data and in the esoteric systems. And I could talk about Scorpio all day long, but I won't spoil all the gems here. But yeah, your reproductive anatomy looks like all the symbols, the archetypes associated with Scorpio, and like in both men and women, or people with male bodies and female bodies, and it, and so, and your vagus nerve is really tied into, like, so deeply into all of it as well. It's really the kind of the transmitter of all of that information.
Wow. All right. So this is going to be good. So if you want to receive this guide, I mean, you should want to. So in order to receive this guide, pull out your cell phone, please, and text hashtag Zodiac to the number 808-343-4997. Okay.
353.
Oh, 353. I apologize. Yes. 808-353-4997. 4997. You will become part of Melanie Weller's community, and then you will receive this awesome guide. And it's fantastic. It's pretty long. What I
It's
love.
about 55 pages or something like that.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
long, yeah.
And so it goes through all of the zodiac symbols, but now I understand that I probably scanned through the beginning part where it actually associates those with the parts of your body. So if you're having symptomology in certain areas, then you could kind of go and say, okay, well, this is a Scorpio area symptomology. Let's look at some of the exercises. And it actually gives you exercises and tools to do. Guys, I love Melanie. She has such juicy stuff to deliver, to share. So first things first, do that. Second thing is, please remember that Melanie is part of our board of mentors at the Rocket Fuel Metaverse. The Rocket Fuel Metaverse is a round the clock entrepreneurial social hub and or educational hub and social club that enables you to have access to these board of mentors so that you could kind of sample their expertise and decide, who do I want to work more deeply with? If you find that you're having a lot of physical symptoms that are holding you back from these big goals, then I think it's really important to spend some time to deep dive with Melanie and her group and her services. She has courses, a lot of different ways to support you to understand, okay, how do I come to appreciate this body story mind connection, and how do I actually do something about it so that I can be more effective.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
in the metaverse, she's talking about conquering the stresses of success. Specifically, I would invite you to go to rocketfuel.com. And I'm going to give you a promo code. I just decided to do this. If you go to rocketfuel.com, you can bump or reduce that ticket down to $1 because you are a podcast listener. Just use the invitation code INSIDER. Okay, I'm going to put this as a banner right now. The code is INSIDER. I just decided to do this off the cuff. All right. So use that code. It will reduce the ticket down to $1. It's an amazing 3-day experience, 3 days packed talking about vision, strategy, and tactics, and delivering to you curated experts like Melanie Weller that are going to help you reach your new heights with their expertise. I'm also actually going to, since you had your cell phone out, I'm going to ask you to text RFM to 909-741-1321. This is how you're going to get the agenda, and you'll get notifications of the really exciting presentations that are going to be going on between January 10th and January 12th. I know we all have meetings and things to go to, but this will allow you to be in the inside scoop while things are going on. And I'm just so excited, Melanie, that you're going to be part of this process because.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm so excited too, Wanda. And I'll just reiterate because you touched on it. As a physical therapist, I think it's very important to have measurable, meaningful change. And that's really what so much of this, like giving people change that have had long-term problems. Very quick change has been my drug of choice for many years. And so I'm very passionate about helping people get where they want to be as quickly and easily and pleasurably as possible. And I talk a lot of, and maybe the big secret is that even though I talk a lot of story, because that's how people will understand it. I think fundamentally at the root of this, it's geometry. But you will never, but I would bore people if I talked all day long about the geometry about it.
The geometry.
So I'm talking about the story. It's like the geometry of the cosmos relative to the geometry of the body. And
right.
Yeah, like it's all, yeah.
She's so brilliant, guys. And yeah. And I love just nerding out with her because I'm like, yeah, just tell me about the geometry stuff and the story stuff. I love it all. But it's true. It's that blocks people out more, right, than really focusing on the story. And then But to your point, having that healthcare professional background, at the end of the day, it's about results. It's about actually changing things measurably for you guys, right? So I hope that you receive from meeting Melanie, and why I get so excited about the existence of Melanie Weller is that she has that appreciation. It's not just about getting you excited about the woo and like, ooh, understanding all of these things and why story. It's actually practically saying like, okay, so now how is this currently a disservice in your life? What are you being held back from? And then how do you change that through this wisdom, right? This modern day wisdom and this ancient wisdom. And
Absolutely.
Melanie Weller
Yep.
is your portal to that change. With that being said, I hope that you all have a wonderful day. Thank you so much, Melanie. You can see Melanie in the metaverse January 10th through 12th. She's also part of our board of mentors, so she will be in the metaverse along the entire journey. But make sure you don't miss out on your ticket. If you are an ambitious entrepreneur, I want you to be there. It's your opportunity. I'm sorry, I'm petting my dog right now who decided she wants to be part of the podcast. But yeah, it's your opportunity to be connected in this amazing space and learn from some amazing people. With that, Melanie, thank you so much. It is evident why you are rocket fuel.
Thank you, Wanda. Love you so much.
Bye now. Love you too.